Hey everyone, it's Brandon, author of The Holdbacks, The Mall in Purgatory, and other books. And today I want to talk to you about chapters, specifically how to end a chapter. You're writing a book, you get to the end of a chapter, what do you do? What is the goal of a chapter? What do you need to accomplish? What kinds of things do you need to keep in mind at the end of a chapter to encourage the reader to keep reading into the next chapter? So that's what we're going to talk about today, how to end a chapter in a novel. So let's jump on the page. This is an example. This is an actual book. This is an excerpt taken from uh, The Girl with All the Gifts by M.R. Carey. It's an excellent book if you haven't read it. They actually made a movie out of it. But I just chose this chapter. This is the end of a chapter in the novel, The Girl with All the Gifts. And I chose this one because I like the way that it ends, and it's going to illustrate a point I want to make. So the end of a chapter, what is a chapter? A chapter is just basically a portion of a book, right? And usually it's grouped by scenes. Maybe it's just one scene, maybe it's several scenes. So when you get to the end of a chapter, uh, there are a couple things that can happen. For one thing, it gives the reader a break, right? It gives the reader a chance to kind of pause and process everything that they've just read in that chapter and everything that has happened to the character and the events of the story up to that point. The end of a chapter also gives your character a chance to pause and reflect. So a lot of times at the end of a chapter, we are inside the character's head, and the character is kind of reflecting on everything that just happened. Maybe they don't feel good about it. That's usually how it goes at the end of a chapter. Things are not well, not everything is not going well. And so there's a sense of unease a lot of times. But so either way, you end a chapter, the reader has a chance to pause and reflect on what they've just read. The character has a chance to pause and reflect on what they've just lived and experienced within the story. So there's basically two kinds of chapter endings, two ways to end a chapter. One is kind of a cliffhanger type of ending where, dun dun dun, something gets suspenseful, and then, oh my gosh, what's going to happen next? There's also just a natural pause kind of an ending. And that's, you can't have it every chapter end with a cliffhanger because it gets a little overused and it gets wearying for the reader. It kind of wears thin. So best case scenario, depending on the type of book you're writing, what I like to do in mine, I tend to write sci-fi thrillers, horror, action type things. So I will alternate between the cliffhangery types of chapter endings and just the natural pause endings just to get a nice rhythm. So let's look at one that is kind of in the cliffhanger category. Again, this is a chapter at the end of a chapter in The Girl with All the Gifts. So we have a woman who teaches kids who are essentially like hybrid zombies. They carry this infection. They're infected with this thing, but they're functional. They're able to communicate with other people. So they're in this kind of school, in this protected compound, but they have to be heavily secured and restrained because they're also dangerous. If they get the smell of a human, they actually want to attack and bite. Very interesting story. So here we have one of the military people talking to the woman, Miss Justino, who teaches these kids and is very attached to them. So, he's kind of threatened her a little bit vaguely. And so she says, "You want to lay hands on me, Sergeant? And I won't touch a hair on your head," he says, exasperated. "I can keep order in my own damn house." And she reads it suddenly in his face. She can see that he's talking around something that's fresh in his mind. "What have you done?" she demands. "Nothing." "What have you done?" "Nothing that concerns you." He's still talking when she walks away, but it's not hard to shut the words out. They're just words. By the time, and I have a typo here, by the time she gets to the classroom block, she's running. So what we have here at the end of this chapter is this woman questioning the military guy, the sergeant, and she knows something's up. He's like, "I can keep order in my own damn house." So right away, we feel that he has done something regarding these kids, and it's probably not good for them. And so she sees it in his face. She hears it in his voice. He's talking. He's trying to avoid saying something. Now, I like that. A couple things I like here. "What have you done?" she demands. Nothing. What have you, I like how this repeats. What have you done? You can almost feel this woman, the tension, uh, in this woman repeating her question, like, what have you done? She knows something terrible. And then he says, nothing that concerns you. So that's another hint. Okay, clearly he has done something. And then he's still talking when she walks away, but it's not hard to shut the words out. And then boom, by the time she gets to the classroom block, she's running. That is a great way to end a chapter because you can almost feel the tension. Well, you can feel the tension. I certainly can. Between this woman questioning this guy about his actions regarding these kids in the school that she teaches and she actually loves dearly, um, despite the danger these kids possess. And then we get to this, she's walking away. Notice the shift here. He's still talking when she walks away, but it's not hard to shut the words out. They're just words. So she's ignoring what this guy's, he's like, blah, 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 running on, and she's ignoring him. And then by the time she gets to the classroom block, she's running. And that's kind of a cliffhanger type of ending because you're like, oh crap, there's a question, a huge unanswered question here, right? What has this guy done to these kids? And we can feel her concern and her tension because she's running by the time she gets there. That's a cliffhanger type of chapter ending. And now you can't do this every chapter because there's a thing called pacing in a story, right? You kind of gradually increase the tension throughout a story until you reach the climax and boom, while the fireworks go off. That's the most exciting part of the story. So you can't have this thrilling, high tension, high stakes chapter ending every time because it creates problems with pacing. By the time you get to the climax, people are just kind of like weary from all of the cliffhangers. So, the chapter before this one in The Girl with All the Gifts and the chapter after it, they ended a little more calmly, if you will. There wasn't like a high stakes, she wasn't running for something. They weren't as cliffhanger oriented. And that's a good thing to keep in mind when you're ending your chapters. So again, there's many ways to end a chapter, but just boil it down to those two categories. You have kind of like an exciting, sexy cliffhanger where the reader's like, oh no, I have to keep going. And then you just have the natural pause type of chapter ending where the character can reflect on what has happened and the reader can also reflect on what they've just read, but maybe the tension is not quite so high. And then you just gradually increase that tension as you go through the story toward the climax. Now, in closing, I want to read you a quote from Jack Ketchum. If you don't know him, he rest in peace. He's no longer with us. He wrote quite a few horror novels and thriller type novels, including Off Season and The Girl with All the Gifts. I just want to read you this quote here. This is something he said about the craft of writing during an interview. I think it's also important to pay attention to the starts and stops. When the sounds stop at the end of a chapter, a section of a chapter, or the actual end of the story, I want the silence that follows to have resonance, to stay with you like a tune you can't quite let go of, because usually that's when you have the best chance to contemplate the meaning of the thing. So that's something to think about when you're ending a chapter. You want to end it in some kind of way where uh, the reader can pause and contemplate as he says here, contemplate the meaning of the thing being whatever they just read, the chapter. So at the end of a chapter, end it in a way that makes the reader pause and think. With the cliffhanger type of chapter ending, as we've shown up here, you can just, show something exciting happening or have an unanswered question that's going to propel the reader forward. But in other cases, you just want to give the reader a chance to pause and contemplate the meaning of the thing. So, when I write the end of a chapter in a book that I'm working on, I will rewrite it. I'm a rewriter by nature. I rewrite things over and over again until I feel like they're as good as they can possibly be. But especially at the end of a chapter, I will rewrite it probably 10 to 12 different times, sometimes more. And I just keep thinking it and I'll look at it and I'll read it, I'll put it aside and I'll come back to it and read it again with fresh eyes and say, does this tie up this chapter in a way that makes the reader think about what just happened and contemplate it? Is it going to resonate? Like Jack Ketchum said, he wants it to have resonance, the end of a chapter. And you can do that by ending the chapter in your character's head, maybe showing the reader what your character is thinking about everything that has just happened, and especially if they're thinking about it in a bad way. And you can also do that through the cliffhanger type of ending, like we just talked about. So that's just a quick review of how to end a chapter in a novel and some of the considerations you should make, some of the things you should you should think about, and that's essentially it. So again, this is not a writing class. There aren't any specific rules. These are just suggestions. It's creative writing is what it's called. So you have plenty of options of how to do it. But think about the cliffhanger option for chapter ending and think about the natural pause and getting the reader to contemplate everything that they've just read, giving them a chance to consider it, digest it, and have the end of your chapter resonate. Rewrite it until it's spot on and it just really keeps the reader engaged and turning the pages. Thanks for watching and happy writing.